Good morning, Europe. I'm Mariam Zaidi, and these are your top stories for Friday.
Western allies show their unity against Russia after a marathon day of diplomacy. But Ukrainian President Zelensky wants more. Kyiv accuses Moscow of forcibly removing hundreds of thousands of people from Ukrainian cities to pressure them to surrender. And after years of COVID woes, the tourism sector suffers another blow from sanctions against Russia.
After a marathon day of meetings with NATO allies and G7 countries, Joe Biden's last stop in Brussels was at the European Union summit. This was a new opportunity to show Western unity against the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, after his assault on Ukraine began 1 month ago.
And the very thing that Putin has tried to do from the beginning, and I've been saying this since my days as Vice President of the United States, is to break up NATO. Break up NATO. He'd rather face 30 independent countries than 30 united countries with the United States of America. Not a joke. I'm being deadly earnest. I believe that's been his intention from the very, very beginning.
Biden joined the EU's top diplomats to discuss the situation in Ukraine and to plan how the EU is to reduce dependency on Russian fossil fuels. The stakes are high. There is a possibility that the US will boost its supplies of LNG gas to Europe. Also, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky joined the meeting through a video link. He wants tougher sanctions on Russia. But on European soil, some member states are not ready to suspend gas contracts with Moscow.
It would have a devastating impact on the European economy, and I think it's not necessary.
While others think that cutting gas contracts is the only option to stop the war and force Russia to negotiate.
The sooner we understand that this is the main oxygen for the Russian war machine, the better.
Meanwhile, just in front of the building where the summit took place, protesters lay on the ground in honour of Ukraine's many victims and to push European leaders to act.
Well, EU leaders were joined by US President Joe Biden last night for an historic summit. It was the first time a US president joined an EU summit. They discussed the importance of Western unity, the importance of applying much more pressure on Vladimir Putin with increasing sanctions over the next while. They also discussed the importance of other countries to get on board and not circumventing sanctions, in particular China and India, who haven't declared that they're also going to support the sanctions regime against Russia. There was warnings from Joe Biden to China of the implications, the potential implications of supporting Russia economically or militarily. Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, also joined EU leaders, thanking them for the support, but also calling for much more military aid. Today, EU leaders are convening again for a complicated discussion about the impact of sanctions on growing energy prices, in particular gas prices. There doesn't seem to be any particular set of conclusions that will be outstanding, but we know that the Spanish Prime Minister, for example, is calling for a price capping on gas. There could be some agreement on that.
Ukrainian forces have been bolstered by the destruction of a major Russian landing ship as it brought in supplies to its troops. Dramatic pictures show billowing fire and black smoke as the Orsk docked in Berdansk on the Azov Sea. Ukraine claims it was hit by one of its ballistic missiles. With Russian shelling continuing, Kyiv and Moscow are giving conflicting accounts about people being relocated to Russia and whether or not they were being moved willingly or were being coerced or lied to. Ukraine accuses Moscow of forcibly taking over 400,000 civilians from shattered Ukrainian cities to be used as hostages to pressure Kyiv into giving up. The Kremlin has given nearly identical numbers for those who've been relocated, but it said they wanted to go to Russia. While Ukraine's forces struggle to hold the nearly destroyed port city of Mariupol, another port, that of Odessa, is getting ready. Soldiers and residents remain alert, waiting for a Russian offensive against the city. Ukraine's defense ministry is claiming its troops have pushed back Russian forces from some areas around Kyiv, but Russian troops are still surrounding the capital.
Boarding a bus, hopefully to safety. These are some of the last people to leave Irpin, the flashpoint town on Kyiv's northwestern outskirts, after intense fighting and bombing has made it impossible to stay. Most had been sheltering in basements for the last 3 weeks. Once a sleepy suburbia, Irpin's strategic importance for Vladimir Putin's stall bid to encircle Kyiv has already left it devastated by some of the heaviest fighting in the war. Little Daria plays with her dinosaur mittens as the bus takes her family away from the fighting that has wrecked her home. It's her birthday today.
A bomb hit the house. The windows and doors were blown out, and we decided to leave. We were planning some candles and a cake for my daughter's birthday, but we had to leave it.
Meanwhile, Yaroslava has left with her family's 5 dogs.
They are like kids to us. They are very friendly, very playful, but they are scared of the explosions and of the shooting. I could not leave them behind.
The UN's refugee agencies say that 10 million people have now fled their homes, or about 22% of Ukraine's entire population. 3.6 million have fled to surrounding countries, while 6.5 million are thought to be displaced inside Ukraine.
Global leaders met in Brussels for a G7 and NATO summit to coordinate the response to the ongoing war in Ukraine. The group discussed sanctions and their humanitarian aid response. The meetings come at a historic point of unity for NATO, according to U.S. President Joe Biden. Some of the key points from the summit include G7 leaders welcoming an investigation into possible war crimes committed in Ukraine. Others have increased their willingness to take in more refugees, such as the U.S., which pledged to house 100,000 people, easing the burden on Europe.
Als G7
As the G7, we're also calling on other countries to contribute support measures and humanitarian aid. Europe is shouldering a lot here, but we really need a global effort. As leading industrialized nations, we see it as our duty to take in refugees from Ukraine and protect them. All G7 countries see this duty and want to live up to it. We also ask other countries to take in war refugees.
U.S. President Joe Biden also commented on the global humanitarian consequences for the war.
With regard to food shortage, yes, we did talk about food shortages. And it's going to be real. The price of these sanctions is not just imposed upon Russia. It's imposed upon an awful lot of countries as well, including European countries and our country as well.
The UN General Assembly also voted through a resolution that blamed Russia for the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine.
Voting has been completed.
The resolution received overwhelming support, with only 5 countries opposing the measure. The resolution also calls for an immediate ceasefire and protection of civilian infrastructure and hospitals.
After 2 years lost to the COVID-19 pandemic, Turkish businessmen had high hopes for a strong tourist season in 2022. Now the devastating war in Ukraine has caused further economic instability, and shopkeepers in the Turkish Riviera are not optimistic.
We are trying to make money with the help of the tourists, but the war seems to be derailing this holiday season as well.
Not far from the resort town of Belek, Nevzat tends his greenhouses full of sweet peppers. He worries for the future of his crops, as the war and potential sanctions mean his shipments to both Ukraine and Russia will stop.
Then we have only heaven to rely on. If Turkey joins sanctions against Russia, we will go bankrupt, as 99% of our business is exports to Russia.
Already suffering from high energy and food prices, Turkey has yet to feel the full effects of the sanctions imposed on Russia, as well as the ongoing war in Ukraine. This year, the authorities and entrepreneurs alike believe it is simply not realistic to see tourism return to pre-pandemic levels.
We were counting on this year being a good one, but we are faced with this new situation. We all know that our business will suffer badly as a consequence.
Across the street, Maya, a trader who is half Russian and half Georgian, has noticed that her Russian-speaking customers are increasingly preferring to speak in English.
I've been here for 26 years, and I've never experienced anything like this before. It's very bad. If this war does not end, if it continues, we will die also.